Here's something that might surprise you a bit. There's this company, right? Didn't even get a rocket to orbit until 2018.
Yeah.
And now they're the second most frequently launched U.S. rocket provider every single year.
Wow, that's quite a climb.
Incredible, isn't it? We're talking about Rocket Lab. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into all the material you sent over about them.
Exactly. And it's more than just another space company.
Mm.
What's fascinating is how fast they've evolved. I mean, they started out focused on, ride sharing for small satellites.
Right, the Electron rocket.
But now
Yeah.
they're building the spacecraft too, increasingly.
Mm.
So our goal here is to really distill the key stuff for you, their journey, the tech, the business side, financials, and where they're heading. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding a major player in this whole new space era.
Perfect. So we'll pull out the most important insights on where Rocket Lab stands now and their future path. We'll cover Launch Electron, obviously, and the big one, Neutron, but also their space systems side, which is everything from components right up to the Photon satellite platforms. Okay, let's start at the beginning then. How did Rocket Lab get started? What was the initial spark?
Well, it kicked off back in 2006, and they had a really clear vision from the get-go. Frequent, low-cost, dedicated launches just for small satellites.
So targeting that niche specifically?
Exactly. It was a direct response to satellites getting smaller and smaller. They saw these mini satellites needed their own ride to orbit, something affordable and available often. So the early focus was all on developing Electron, their small launcher, and building Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand.
Which was a big deal in itself, right? The first private orbital launch site.
Absolutely. A huge step. It really signaled the opening up of space access beyond just governments and huge corporations.
And Electron wasn't just a standard rocket even then. They were innovating from the start, weren't they? What made it different?
Oh, definitely. Some really groundbreaking tech went into Electron. You've got the Rutherford engine, for instance.
Yes, the electric pumps.
Right. That electric pump-fed design was key to their whole low-cost idea and let them skip the complexity and cost of traditional turbopumps. Really disruptive for small launchers. Plus, they went big on additive manufacturing 3D printing loads of the Rutherford's main parts.
Faster iteration, cheaper production.
You got it. And the other big thing was the structure all-carbon composite. Made Electron super light, which is crucial when you're trying to maximize payload on a small rocket.
So, great vision, innovative tech.
Yeah.
But getting to orbit wasn't immediate, was it? Sounds like there were some bumps along the way.
Oh, for sure. Space is hard, right? Their first orbital test, it's a test, May 2017. Didn't quite make it.
What happened there?
The rocket actually performed pretty well initially, but there was an issue with ground support equipment, communications specifically, so they had to terminate the flight early. But crucially, they learned fast. By January 2018, the next launch, still testing, nailed it, reached orbit. Huge milestone. Then later that year, November 2018 came, it's business time.
Love the names.
Yeah. That was their first fully commercial mission, deploying customer satellites. That really marked their shift into being operational.
It's business time. Definitely captures it. So from that point, they weren't just launching more electrons, were they? Their strategy started to shift, expand.
Right, around 2019, you see this clear strategic evolution. They started seriously looking at making Electron reusable. The goal was, launch even more often, bring costs down further.
The helicopter catch attempt, I remember seeing videos of that.
Yeah, that was ambitious, trying to snag the booster midair. They eventually pivoted from that. Seemed a bit too complex operationally.
So what's the plan now for reuse?
They moved to marine recovery. Basically, let the boosters splash down gently under parachutes in the ocean and then fish it out with a boat. Seems more practical, and they found the boosters handled the salt water pretty well. But the other really big shift in this period was vertical integration, moving into space systems.
Okay, vertical integration. We hear that term a lot. What did that actually mean for Rocket Lab? Why was it so important?
It means doing more yourself, basically, bringing the supply chain in-house. For Rocket Lab, this involved buying several key companies.
The acquisitions.
Exactly. Like Sinclair Interplanetary, they make reaction wheels, star trackers, essential bits for controlling where a satellite points. Then ASI for flight software, PSC for avionics, and Solaro, a big one for high-efficiency solar cells.
So grabbing all the critical pieces.
Right. By owning these capabilities, they get more control, potentially lower costs, speed things up, and critically offer a more complete package to customers. And a huge enabler for all this was going public via that SPAC merger in August 2021.
Gave them a big injection of cash, I imagine.
Huge. Around $777 million gross proceeds. That really fueled this expansion and their even bigger ambitions.
Which brings us to Neutron.
Precisely. That capital enabled the leap to Neutron, a much larger medium-lift reusable rocket, plus upgrading infrastructure, like building Launch Complex 3 for Neutron. And they also really leaned into the defense market, winning that significant NSSL Phase 3 Lane 1 contract. It's a massive transformation from just small launch.
Okay, fantastic overview of the journey. Let's dive deeper into the tech now, starting with Electron, their workhorse. What are the key specs and features that made it so successful?
Well, Electron is tailor-made for small sats, as we said. Lifts up to 320 kilos to low Earth orbit, or LEO. It's a two-stage rocket. Uses liquid oxygen, LOX, and RP-1, which is basically refined kerosene.
Standard stuff there.
Pretty standard propellants, yeah. But the engine, Rutherford, is the star. We mentioned the electric pumps and the 3D printing that really sets it apart in the small launch class. The first stage has 9 of these Rutherfords clustered together for liftoff power.
And the second stage?
That uses a single Rutherford, but one optimized to work efficiently in the vacuum of space to get the payload into orbit.
But there's more to it than just the two main stages for getting satellites exactly where they need to go, right? The kick stage seems crucial.
Oh, absolutely. The kick stage, powered by its own little engine called Curie, is kind of the secret sauce for Electron's mission flexibility. It's essentially a third stage that separates after the second stage does its job.
And it can maneuver independently.
Exactly. The Curie engine can restart multiple times. So the kick stage can fine-tune the orbit, maybe circularize it, or drop off different satellites in slightly different spots on the same launch. Really precise deployment. And importantly, it can do a final burn to deorbit itself so it doesn't become space junk.
Smart, reducing debris.
Very important. And it's got its own power, avionics, comms. It's basically a mini spacecraft itself, which is why it became the foundation for their Photon satellite platform.
Ah, the connection. So, performance-wise, what can Electron reliably deliver, and what's the typical price tag for a dedicated flight?
It typically puts around 200 kilograms into a sun-synchronous orbit, SSO. That's a really popular orbit for Earth observation satellites and the like. And a key strength is their launch cadence. They've managed a pretty high tempo, launching from both NZ and the US.
And the cost.
Historically, a dedicated Electron mission has been around the $7.5 million USD mark. That was pretty disruptive, offering a dedicated flight for small sats at a price point usually associated with rideshares on bigger rockets.
And now reusability is the big push for Electron. Where are they with that program? What are they hoping to achieve?
Right, the reusability program is ongoing. As we mentioned, they're focused on marine recovery now. Booster comes down, parachutes deploy, SAW splashdown, recovery vessel picks it up.
Have they reflown recovered stages?
They've recovered several stages and done tons of analysis. The big milestone was reflying a recovered Rutherford engine back in August 2023. That was a huge proof point.
So the engine survived splashdown and refurbishment.
Okay. Apparently so. The main goals are still boosting launch frequency even higher and eventually lowering the cost per launch. But, reusability for a small rocket like Electron is tricky. Mass margins are tight. Dealing with saltwater corrosion, the whole refurb process, making it routine and genuinely cheaper at scale, that's still a work in progress.
Okay, makes sense. Let's pivot to the future now. Neutron. This is a huge step up for them. What's the strategic thinking behind developing this much bigger medium lift rocket?
It's driven by a few key things. First, market demand. There's a massive need, growing all the time, for launching bigger satellites and especially large constellations. Think communication networks, Earth observation fleets, both commercial and government. Rocket Lab points to projections needing like 10,000 constellation satellites launched by 2030.
Wow, big numbers.
Huge. Second, it's about competition. Neutron lets them play in the medium lift league, directly challenging SpaceX's Falcon 9, ULA's Vulcan, Blue Origin's New Glenn.
Yeah.
The big players.
So moving up a weight class.
Exactly. Third, national security. It solidifies their position for defense contracts, like that NSSL Phase 3 win, which needs medium lift capability. And finally, it ties into their whole end-to-end vision. Neutron can launch the bigger, more complex satellites their own space systems division is building, maybe even their own future constellations someday.
So it's really fundamental to their future strategy. What's the design philosophy? How is it different from Electron, especially on reusability?
Neutron is a two-stage rocket, but the big focus is fully reusing the first stage. The second stage is expendable. Like Electron, it uses advanced carbon composites for the structure to keep weight down, but the really unique bit is the integrated reusable fairing.
The Hungry Hippo design.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Instead of the payload fairing jettisoning off, It stays attached to the first stage, opens up like a clamshell to release the second stage and payload, then closes again before the whole first stage comes back for landing.
That sounds complicated, but clever if it works.
Very. And the whole first stage fairing, engines, everything, is designed to land propulsively, vertically, like Falcon 9, initially on a floating platform, maybe eventually back at the launch site.
And the engine's powering Neutron, not Rutherford's, I assume.
No, completely new engine called Archimedes.
Yeah.
Much more powerful. And it uses different propellants, liquid methane and liquid oxygen or methalox.
Methane is becoming popular. Why that choice?
It offers good performance, it's relatively clean burning, and potentially easier to handle for reuse compared to kerosene. Archimedes also uses a more complex but more efficient combustion cycle called oxygen-rich stage combustion, or ORSC. That helps squeeze out performance, which is vital for a reusable medium lifter. And again, they're making Archimedes completely in-house.
Vertical integration again. So where are they with Neutron development right now? They had a pretty aggressive timeline, targeting launch later this year, right? H2 2025.
That's still the target. Second half of 2025, the first orbital launch is definitely ambitious. Launch Complex 3 down at Wallops in Virginia, the U.S. site for Neutron, is reportedly nearing completion.
And the engine testing.
They've got their Archimedes test site running at NASA Stennis. Big milestone was last August 2024, first successful full-duration hot fire of a full-scale Archimedes engine hitting the thrust targets. So engine testing is progressing well, stage-level testing is also happening, and the plan is still for that first stage to land on their floating platform, which they've named Return on Investment.
Apt name. It all sounds incredibly complex, though. What are the biggest technical hurdles you see them facing to get Neutron flying reliably?
Oh, there are definitely significant challenges. Making those large carbon composite structures strong enough for launch and repeated reentry, while keeping them light and affordable.
That's tough.
Composites at that scale for reuse must be tricky. Very. Then they're scaling up the 3D printing for the big Archimedes engine parts, ensuring quality and production rate. That integrated Hungry Hippo, fairing mechanics, the seals, the heat protection for reentry over and over. Lots to get right there. And finally, just nailing the propulsive landing for a vehicle this size consistently. It needs incredibly sophisticated guidance and control. Yeah, getting all of that done on schedule is the big test.
Definitely a lot riding on Neutron. Before we leave launch vehicles, they also have HASTE. What's that about?
Right, HASTE. Hypersonic Accelerator Suborbital Test Electron. It's basically a modified electron, but it doesn't go to orbit. It's designed as a suborbital test bed specifically for hypersonic technologies.
So for defense customers mainly.
Primarily, yeah. Government agencies, defense contractors, they use HASTE to test components for things like hypersonic missiles or vehicles.
Yeah.
In a real high-speed flight environment, hitting speeds over Mach 22. It uses a lot of the proven electron tech, but has a modified upper stage and can carry a much bigger payload than the orbital version.
Is it operational?
Yep, first launch was June 2023 for the MACHTB program. They've shown they can turn it around pretty quickly for launches and have more tests lined up. It's a neat way to leverage their existing tech for a different market.
Okay, great. So that covers the launch side. Now let's shift gears to what Rocket Lab does in space, their space systems division. Let's unpack the Photon satellite platform family first. What exactly is Photon?
Photon is absolutely central to their whole end-to-end space company strategy, and its roots, as we mentioned, are in Electron's kick stage. They essentially took that flight-proven upper stage and beefed it up.
How so?
They added everything needed to make it a standalone long-duration spacecraft bus.
Sure.
Robust power systems, thermal control, precise attitude control, comm systems, the works. So it went from being a final delivery stage to a versatile platform that can host customer payloads for extended missions.
And it's not just one size fits all, is it? I understand there are different Photon versions.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole family tailored for different jobs. Yeah. The basic one is just called Photon, or sometimes LEO Photon. It's designed mainly for low Earth orbit missions, carrying maybe 170 kilos of payload, using the standard Curie engine. Great for tech demos, hosting payloads, stuff like that.
Okay.
Then you have Explorer. That's the deep space version. Think missions to the moon, like NASA's Capstone, or Mars, like the Escapade mission.
Wow, Electron heritage going interplanetary.
Right, because deep space needs more grunt. The payload capacity is lower, maybe 40, 50 kilos. And it can launch on Electron, but also potentially bigger rockets like Neutron if needed.
What about the big constellations everyone's building?
For that, they have Lightning. It's optimized for those large LEO constellations, designed for high power, long life, scalability. They've even talked about a flat satellite concept for efficient packing.
Who's using Lightning?
Big names. Globalstar for their next-gen network, the U.S. Space Development Agency for their tracking layer satellites. Given the size and number of satellites involved, Lightning is really designed to launch on medium or heavy rockets, including their own Neutron.
Makes sense. Any other variants?
There's also Pioneer. This one's for more specialized complex missions. Higher maneuverability, handles payloads up to maybe 120 kilos. It's suited for things like rendezvous and proximity operations like the Vixtius HACE mission, or even acting as a service module for in-space manufacturing like they did with Fardas Industries.
And you mentioned different engines earlier. Do these different photons use different propulsion?
Good catch, yes. The base Photon uses the Curie engine, but the Deep Space Explorer variant uses the Hypercurie engine.
It's Hypercurie.
Yep. Higher performance, more thrust and efficiency, crucial for those long interplanetary trips. It uses storable hypergolic propellants, good for missions needing multiple restarts after long coast periods in space. So definitely a step up for missions beyond Earth orbit.
It sounds like they're trying to strike a balance with Photon, a standard core but with customizable options.
That's exactly the strategy. Modularity plus customization. They have the core Photon architecture built with their vertically integrated components for reliability and cost effectiveness. Then they add specific mission kits, different propulsion modules, power systems, comms packages, payload interfaces to tailor it for whatever the customer needs. It gives them broad coverage without reinventing the wheel every time.
Beyond the full Photon platforms, they're also big on making and selling the individual components, right? Tell us more about that vertically integrated component business.
Yeah, that's a huge part of their space systems revenue. They design and make a massive range of critical satellite parts in-house. This comes from their own R&D, but also heavily from those strategic acquisitions we talked about, Sinclair, Solero, ASI, PSC.
And they sell these components to other satellite builders too.
Absolutely. It's not just for their own Photon buses or rockets. They have a whole merchant supply business selling these components externally. It's a major revenue stream for the space systems segment.
What kind of components are we talking about? What's in the catalog?
It's pretty comprehensive. Satellite structures, avionics like flight computers and power controllers, full power systems, including those Solero solar panels, their own Curie and Hypercurie propulsion systems, communication systems. Then from the acquisitions, you get reaction wheels and star trackers for attitude control from Sinclair. They also offer software suites like Max Flight software for guiding the spacecraft and Max Ground Data software for mission control.
So hardware and software.
And even services. They offer end-to-end mission management support too, from planning and integration through launch and on-orbit operations, especially if you're using their Photon platform.
This vertical integration really does seem central to their whole approach. What are the main competitive advantages they see in doing everything in-house like this?
Several key advantages. First, control. Better control over supply chains means potentially shorter lead times, lower costs, more reliability. Second, optimization. Tighter integration between, say, the launch vehicle and the satellite can lead to better overall mission performance.
Like designing the satellite to perfectly fit the rocket.
Exactly. Third, bundling. They can offer a package deal launch plus satellite, which can be attractive and maybe less risky for customers needing a full solution. Fourth, innovation. Having everything under one roof allows them to iterate designs faster and roll out new tech across their portfolio more quickly.
Makes sense. But are there downsides? It sounds like it could get very complex and maybe risky too.
Oh, definitely. There are potential risks. Managing such diverse manufacturing and R&D is incredibly complex and needs constant, significant capital investment. Look at their R&D spend on Neutron.
Right, the high operating expenses.
Exactly. There's also the risk of internal bottlenecks. If they have a problem with a key in-house component, it could ripple across multiple product lines, both launch and space systems. And for the component sales business, they have to ensure their internal parts stay competitive technologically and cost-wise against specialized third-party suppliers who might just focus on one thing, like reaction wheels.
So then they need to stay sharp internally.
For sure. And the close links between launch and space systems mean a delay or issue in one area can easily impact the other.
Okay, let's shift to the business side now. We know about the dual revenue streams, launch, and space systems. Can you give us a more detailed picture of their overall business model and strategy?
Right, so two main income streams. And what's really interesting is how that balance has shifted. As of Q1 2025, space systems, the components and satellites, actually brought in the majority of revenue, about 71% of their $122.6 million total for the quarter.
Wow, so space systems is already bigger than launch services.
Yep, and growing strongly. It's generally seen as having potentially higher profit margins too, compared to launch, which is very capital intensive. Launch profitability, especially for Electron, really depends on how often they fly. They've reported positive gross margins for launch in the low 30% range, but they're targeting mid-40s to 50% eventually, banking on higher cadence and reuse benefits.
And their future order book, the backlog.
Still very strong. Over $1 billion total backlog as of Q1 2025. And again, Space Systems makes up the bigger chunk, around 60%, with launch at 40%, shows solid demand across the board with a good mix of government and commercial customers too.
Their launch operations setup is also pretty unique, launching from both NZ and the US. What's the strategy behind having sites in both hemispheres?
It's all about flexibility and market access. Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand, with its 2 pads, gives them access to a huge range of orbital inclinations, especially good for polar and sun-synchronous orbits. Plus, being private gives them lots of control over scheduling.
And the US site.
Launch Complex 2 at Wallopson, Virginia is crucial for U.S. government missions and other customers needing a domestic launch. And now LC-3 is being built there specifically for Neutron. So this dual hemisphere approach means more options for customers, potential for higher launch rates, redundancy if one site has issues, and access to a global market. But it adds complexity. Managing logistics, dealing with different regulations like U.S. ITAR rules, coordinating teams across the globe. It's not simple.
What about launch pricing? We touched on Electron's $7.05. What's the target for Neutron, and how do they position themselves against competitors?
Right. Electron around $7.5 million for a dedicated flight was their initial market disruption play. For Neutron, the target price point is around $50 million.
Okay, so significantly more, but for a much bigger rocket.
Exactly. That $50 order price is aimed squarely at competing with Falcon 9 and the other medium-lift launchers. It needs to be cost competitive in that bracket. They also still offer ride shares on Electron for smaller payloads needing a cheaper option. The whole pricing strategy is a balancing act. Be competitive, attract customers, but also generate enough revenue to fund everything, especially Neutron.
We've talked components and satellite buses. Are they looking further up the value chain, maybe operating their own constellations, providing data services?
That definitely seems to be on the long-term roadmap. It's a logical next step for a fully integrated space company. Right now, the focus is delivering integrated missions for customers, Photon Plus launch, and growing that component sales business.
But the ambition is there.
Well, yeah, they've hinted at potentially owning and operating their own constellations for data services or other applications down the line. Developing platforms like Lightning, which is designed for big constellations, and acquiring Mynaric, a leader in laser communications for intersatellite links. Those moves strongly suggest they're laying the groundwork. But near term, it's all about getting Neutron flying and scaling the current Space Systems hardware business.
Okay, let's zoom out to the wider industry. What's the market landscape look like for Rocket Lab? Who are up against?
They're playing in several really dynamic markets. Small launch, obviously, where Electron competes mainly with Firefly Aerospace operationally, plus various Chinese providers and a swarm of hopeful startups.
Crowded field.
Very. Then medium launch, where Neutron will go up against the established Falcon 9 and the upcoming Vulcan, New Glenn, Ariane 6. That's heavyweight competition.
And on the space system side, components and buses.
For components, it's a mix, big traditional aerospace suppliers and other agile new space firms. For satellite buses, they're competing with the major manufacturers like Lockheed Martin or Aerobus, but also newer players focused on buses, like Terran Orbital or York Space Systems. The whole market is driven by trends like satellite miniaturization, lots of private investment, the big push for reusability and lower costs, and this expansion beyond just launch into making satellites and potentially services.
Given all that, can you maybe give us a quick SWOT analysis? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats for Rocket Lab.
Sure. Strengths. Proven Electron launcher, that valuable vertical integration in Space Systems, their dual hemisphere launch infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, and that strong billion-dollar backlog.
Okay.
Weaknesses. Still not consistently profitable. The technical and economic uncertainties around making Electron reuse really pay off, and the huge execution risk tied to getting Neutron developed and flying reliably. Opportunities. Massive growth in both small and medium launch markets, huge demand for satellite parts and platforms globally, their growing foothold in government defense work, and the potential to move into in-space services or data apps later on.
And threats.
Intense competition everywhere, launch and systems, Neutron development delays or maybe underperformance, Electron reuse not proving economical, and just the general market and financial risks of being in the capital-hungry space business.
That paints a clear picture. And quickly, using Porter's five forces, how's the competitive environment shape up?
Okay, rapid fire. Rivalry among competitors, high. Very high in launch, growing in systems. Threat of new entrants, varies. High-ish for basic small launch, much lower for reliable cadence or complex systems due to cost and tech barriers. Buyer power. Moderate to high, especially big constellation or government customers. Supplier power. Mitigated for Rocket Lab because they make so much in-house, but still there for raw materials, etc. Threat of substitutes. Pretty low for launch and satellite manufacturing right now.
Got it. Let's dig into the financials a bit more. What are the key trends you see in their performance since going public?
Well, strong revenue growth, definitely. Fueled mainly by space systems booming. Gross margins have been improving, which is positive. But operating expenses are high, mostly because of that massive R&D investment, especially in Neutron. So bottom line, they've been reporting net losses so far.
And the segment split reflects that.
Yeah, space systems drives the revenue currently. Launch is more capital intensive and its profitability hinges on getting that cadence up and reuse working. The backlog is also dominated by space systems orders, suggesting that trend will continue for a while. Key metrics to watch are revenue growth, gross margin improvements, operating costs, especially R&D stabilizing eventually, that backlog conversion, their cash burn rate, and debt levels. Analyst ratings and price targets give you a sense of market sentiment too.
How have they funded all this, especially Neutron? That must be burning cash.
It's been a mix. Started with venture capital when private, then the big SPEC merger brought in that 777 LM pot.
Yeah.
Since then, they've used debt financing and issued more equity to raise funds. A huge chunk of capital expenditure, or CapEx, is flowing into Neutron factories, LC3, R&D. But they're also still investing in electron enhancements, reuse, the other launch pads, and scaling up space systems production. So yes, significant cash utilization.
What does the balance sheet look like now?
As of early 2025, they still had a strong cash position, which is good, but also significant debt on the books, growing property, plant, and equipment from all the infrastructure build-out, intangible assets from those acquisitions, and because of the cumulative net losses, negative retained earnings. It's typical for a company in this heavy investment phase.
And the stock market reaction, you mentioned volatility.
Well, yeah, it's been a bumpy ride for the stocks since the public listing. That's pretty normal for companies in this sector. High growth, but also high risk. The market is constantly weighing the massive potential Neutron success, space systems growth, against the very real execution risks. Stock price tends to jump or fall based on progress reports, especially on Neutron testing milestones and their path towards profitability. Analysts' opinions are varied too, some very bullish, others more cautious about the hurdles.
Okay, looking ahead then, next 3 to 5 years, what's your overall outlook? What are the absolute must-succeed items for Rocket Lab?
This period is absolutely critical. Job number one, without a doubt, is successfully developing and commercializing Neutron, getting it flying, proving its reliability, securing customers. That unlocks the big medium lift market.
It's the key catalyst.
Totally. Simultaneously, they must keep scaling space systems profitably. That demand from LEO constellations and government is huge. They need to capture it efficiently. For Electron, they need to really optimize its role, figure out the true economics of reuse, and keep that launch cadence high for the small sat market.
So execute on Neutron, grow space systems, optimize Electron.
And manage the complexity, keep finances disciplined, adapt to competition. If they can nail those things, they have a real shot at becoming a dominant end-to-end player and achieving sustained profits. But it's a high-wire act.
So wrapping up our deep dive, Rocket Lab's journey has been pretty remarkable. From small launch pioneer to a major vertically integrated player betting big on Neutron, they've got proven tech with Electron, a booming space systems business, but huge challenges ahead. Getting Neutron right, becoming profitable, fighting off intense competition.
Exactly. Strong foundation, proven innovation. But the next few years are make or break. Neutron's success and space systems profitability are the absolute key indicators. It's a fascinating mix of massive opportunity and significant risk. Definitely a company to keep a close eye on.
So here's a thought for you listening. With that huge investment and all the technical hurdles for Neutron, what do you think is the single biggest factor, maybe technical, maybe market, maybe financial, that will ultimately decide if Rocket Lab succeeds or falters in the next 5 years? Something to chew on. That's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.